Picture a nation grappling with widespread poverty, unemployment, soaring crime rates, and a pervasive drug culture. Daily life is marred by frequent riots, overpopulation, and staggering illiteracy rates. This was the grim reality of Singapore back in 1965, earning it the infamous moniker of the slum city of Asia. Corruption had permeated every part of the society, while ethnic and religious tensions simmered, fueling power struggles. Adding to these difficulties was the fact that Singapore had a lot of people living in a small area, which made it exceedingly difficult for the poor to live comfortably. Adding to the adversity was the devastation wrought upon the nation's infrastructure during World War II, when Japanese occupation left the tiny island nation in ruins. Diseases ran rampant, and food shortages pushed people to the brink of starvation. Yet, fast forward to the present day, and Singapore stands as a shining beacon of development and progress. It boasts the second highest GDP per capita globally, trailing only behind Luxembourg. Singapore leads the world in economic freedom and labor force quality, reducing future political risks. It has now become the fifth least corrupt country in the world, renowned for its safety and cleanliness, not only in Asia but across the globe. With a GDP exceeding $600 billion, Singapore outstrips gigantic nations like Bangladesh, Pakistan, and Iran. Its transformation has positioned itself as a model for other developing countries to emulate. But how did this tiny island nation with a lack of significant natural resources achieve such a remarkable success? In the 18th century, the Dutch Empire and the British Empire were fierce economic competitors. Through colonization, both empires gained significant control over resources from less developed civilizations. During this period, a British colonial official named Stamford Raffles was seeking a new settlement to serve as a British outpost. Leaving Calcutta, he explored much of Southeast Asia and eventually arrived in Singapore. There, he negotiated with Temenggong Abdul Rahman for the establishment of a British trading post on the island. In 1819, Raffles signed a treaty with Sultan Hussein and Temenggong, effectively incorporating Singapore into the British Empire as a trading post. To compete with Dutch ports in the region, Raffles designated Singapore as a free port, granting it a strategic geographical advantage. This meant that ships passing through were exempt from paying fees, attracting numerous merchants and traders, who utilized Singapore as a refueling center for their trade fleets. At the same time, in nearby Malaysia, the tin and rubber industries were thriving and played a crucial role in the nation's economy. Given its close proximity, Singapore became a hub for processing Malaysian rubber, which helped to diversify its economy. By the 1830s, Singapore had emerged as the center of English country trade, surpassing Jakarta as a hub for Chinese junk trade. In 1869, the Suez Canal became operational, connecting the Mediterranean Sea to the Red Sea. This meant that European ships were no longer required to circumnavigate Africa to reach Asian markets, and vice versa. Between 1824 and 1879, Singapore's port trade volume increased from $11 million to $105 million. The most significant growth occurred between 1869 and 1879, due to the reduced travel time facilitated by the Suez Canal. The city-state of Singapore evolved into the administrative capital of British Malaya. Roads and railways were developed to transport primary materials such as crude oil, rubber, and tin from the Malay Peninsula to Singapore. These products were then shipped to Britain and other international markets. While this might sound like rapid development was occurring in Singapore, there was a darker side to it. All the profits from these resources and raw materials flowed back to Britain, benefiting the British economy more than Singapore's. On top of that, the British were cultivating opium in Bengal, and they processed opium in Singapore. They employed Chinese porters for this work, sourcing the lowest grade of opium available. These Chinese laborers, working in these factories, became opium addicts, and their numbers continued to rise, exacerbating social issues such as crime and domestic violence. By 1941, it was estimated that there were more than 16,500 opium addicts in Singapore. On February 15, 1952, Japan invaded both Singapore and Malaysia. Over the next 3.5 years, Japan held control over the island, wreaking havoc on its infrastructure. During this period, countless soldiers suffered as prisoners of war, and thousands of people were forced into labor. By the time Japan was defeated in 1945, Singapore faced widespread challenges. Gambling, prostitution, destroyed buildings, poverty, and rampant diseases. It seemed impossible for the nation to recover from such dire conditions. However, amidst this turmoil, there emerged a pivotal figure in Singapore's history, a man who would transform the nation's fate forever. Before further moving on, if you have watched this video so far, then please hit the like and subscribe button to support the channel. After World War II, the British regained control of the state. They restored essential services such as gas, water, and electricity. In July 1945, the Labour Party came to power in the UK, which represented a stance against imperialism. As a result, the state of Singapore was allowed to transition to self-governance. In 1959, the first nationwide elections were held, and these elections were won by a young leader named Lee Kuan Yew, who served as the Secretary General of the People's Action Party. Initially, Lee believed that Singapore would struggle to survive as an independent nation and should instead become part of Malaysia. In 1963, Singapore formally became part of Malaysia. However, it later reclaimed its sovereignty. The merger was met with discontent among the people of Singapore because the city-state had to allocate 40% of its revenue to the central government of Malaysia, even though it constituted only 17% of the population. Special rights were granted to Malaysians, which other ethnic groups in Singapore found discriminatory. The tensions escalated, which led to racial riots in 1964. Ultimately, these factors culminated in Singapore's separation from Malaysia in 1965. Once again, Singapore found itself standing alone, with limited resources and high unemployment. Since Singapore was a tiny nation, so it did not have a powerful army like its neighbors to protect itself. Lee Kuan Yew, in his efforts to spread peace around the region, founded the ASEAN Group, which consisted of Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, and Thailand. Its primary objectives were to accelerate regional economic growth, promote social progress, foster cultural development, and enhance peace and security in Southeast Asia. The government of Lee Kuan Yew heavily invested in education and launched many vocational training programs to solve the problem of illiteracy. He also made Singapore a secular state, so that there could be no riots or violence in the name of religion and ethnicity. He introduced an ethnic integration policy in the state. According to this policy, the government housing would have a fixed ratio for the people living there, based on ethnicity. He also believed that cleanliness is key to Singapore's success, and started a nationwide campaign to spread his message across the nation. At the same time, he also introduced national service and made it compulsory for every boy of 18 years of age. But that was not enough. During that period, Singapore lacked the capital to kickstart its economic endeavors. Prime Minister Lee implemented a policy of economic liberalization and promoted a free market for capital flow. However, other Asian tiger economies like Hong Kong and South Korea were pursuing similar strategies. Despite the same industrial policy and free market, Singapore outperformed its other peers. By the end of the 20th century, Singapore boasted a per capita income higher than the rest of Asian tigers. So, what set Singapore apart in boosting its GDP per capita exponentially? Since gaining independence, the People's Action Party has been the sole governing party in Singapore. Additionally, it has maintained its status as a free port for international trade, which remains a major competitive advantage even to this day. Also, a notable aspect of Singapore's economic model is the government's ownership or regulation of land, labor, and capital resources, allowing for strategic allocation. This focus has enabled the Singaporean government to prioritize three critical aspects of social welfare: housing, medical care, and education. Most importantly, Singapore's Housing Development Board, HDB, has played a pivotal role, providing housing for nearly 85% of the population since the 1980s. These public housing units, mostly owned by residents, have helped maintain low wages by integrating industrial premises into residential areas, providing accessible labor for factories. Investments in public health and education have boosted labor productivity and skills. At the same time, a robust family planning campaign has encouraged low fertility and significantly increased female labor participation. The government also influences the wages and salaries of its labor through various means. One of its primary methods is controlling the supply of labor by managing visas and immigration. Secondly, it employs a significant workforce within the public sector. Additionally, the Singapore Investment Corporation, which the government oversees, affects both labor demand and supply, as well as labor prices. Thirdly, the government plays a dominant role in collaboration with unions, employers, and the National Wages Council. This collaboration results in annual wage increase guidelines for the private sector. Lastly, the government exerts control over labor movements, significantly impacting the business sector. Social security is provided through the Central Provident Fund, CPF, or forced savings schemes. In these schemes, both employers and employees contribute mandated percentages of salaries, which can range from 20% to 50% of the employee's salaries. Although intended to be retirement savings, employees could and did use these funds to purchase housing, limited medical and educational support, as well as equity investments in specific blue-chip companies. These institutional innovations have allowed the Singaporean government to deliver high-quality public and social services without running deficits in the public sector. The majority of public sector agencies generate surpluses, contributing to a consistently balanced government budget. During the 1990s and 2000s, many state-owned monopolistic enterprises such as Singapore Airlines, Singapore Telecoms, Singapore Mass Transit, and others became publicly listed corporations, dominating the market capitalization of the Singapore Stock Exchange. Singapore's efficient organization facilitated rapid urban development with minimal political opposition. This, coupled with low inflation, fiscal balance, political stability, and low corruption, made Singapore the preferred regional headquarters for multinational corporations. Singapore's status as a one-party state for 3 generations has significantly contributed to its economic success in the 20th century, with strong social and institutional support underpinning its achievements. Singapore's journey from a colonial trading post to a thriving industrial and now a high-tech economy mirrors that of other Asian economic powerhouses like South Korea, Taiwan, and Hong Kong. Today, Singapore stands as one of the world's wealthiest nations, boasting a significant asset management industry with around $4 trillion under management as of 2021. Continuing its tradition of attracting foreign investment, Singapore offers enticing incentives such as tax breaks, research and development subsidies, training support, and access to a highly skilled workforce. Its strategic location, top-notch infrastructure, efficient logistics, and favorable legal and tax frameworks further bolster its status as a global financial hub and the preferred regional base for multinational corporations. However, Singapore's rapid growth has also led to challenges, including a growing income and wealth gap, exacerbated by its status as a tax haven, attracting ultra-wealthy individuals. Additionally, its small size and limited resources mean that the majority of its food is imported, highlighting concerns about food security. To sustain its growth trajectory, Singapore is diversifying its economy into new high-tech and high-skill sectors, often relying on specialized foreign talent. As Singapore undergoes generational shifts, there may be tensions between traditional values and modern lifestyles, requiring a delicate balance to be struck. Changes in family structures and dynamics, such as declining birth rates and an aging population, challenge traditional notions of family and community. Like many other developed economies, it grapples with issues such as declining birth rates, widening inequality, soaring housing costs, and heavy reliance on foreign labor. As Singapore navigates these modern challenges, it remains to be seen how effectively it will address them in the coming years, as Singapore exemplifies the profound impact of long-term strategic planning and government policies on society and the economy. Through its commitment to political stability and the promotion of free trade, Singapore has emerged as one of the wealthiest nations globally. In contrast, its former ruler, Britain, faces significant political and economic hurdles, leading to a decline from its once prominent position as the world's wealthiest nation. And if you're curious about how Britain transitioned from prosperity to adversity, click on the video to the right, and I will see you there.